welcome to this session. So starting your safeguarding journey. So I'm going to start with some introductions. So my name's Jude Toasland, and I'm a senior consultant at the Child Protection and Sport Unit. My background's actually as a social worker, though I've worked for the Child Protection and Sport Unit for the last, I think it's 15 years now. And I work with a number of different organisations, national governing bodies of sport, active partnerships and other organisations around keeping children safe in sport. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. Liza, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
My name's Liza Ware. I'm one of the senior consultants in the Child Protection Sport Unit. So I come from a social work background and been in the team for about 6 years now. Previously, I was a frontline child protection social worker, but have the pleasure of working for the team because I love sport and I love safeguarding children. So that's just a little bit about me, Jude.
That's great. Thank you very much. And Joe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So my name's Joe Cartwright, and I'm a training and development consultant with the CPSU. I've been with the NSPCC for over 10 years now. The vast majority of the time, I was working on the helpline, which I know we'll mention today.
Great. And we are going to be also joined by Rachel. Now, Rachel's kind of staying in the background and answering your questions. So we're going to be talking about safeguarding children, so not safeguarding adults today. If you are interested in safeguarding adults, the Anne Craft Trust is a good place to go to. So if you do have any concerns, you'll see here the details of the NSPCC helpline. So that's their phone number, 0808 800 5000, and they've also got the email address help@nspcc.org.uk. So that's where to go if you need to report any concerns or discuss any concerns with them. So this is what we're going to be talking about this evening. So we're going to be telling you a little bit about who we are, just in case you don't know about the Child Protection and Sport Unit. And then we're going to go on to think about, okay, safeguarding, what does that actually mean and why is it important? And then some practical advice and guidance about what you need to have in place to have a safe structure. And some examples as well as to what safeguarding looks like in practice. And we'll finish with some questions from yourselves, and we'll also signpost you to some resources that we've got across the Child Protection in Sport Unit. So I'll start off just telling you a little bit about the Child Protection in Sport Unit. So we were set up in 2001 following some serious child protection concerns in sport. And since this time, we've developed work across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And we've got links with Children First in Scotland too. Now, we've generally worked with national governing bodies of sport and active partnerships, but we really want to reach out to local clubs and activities to support your safeguarding on the ground. And with this in mind, this is the first of what we hope will be several sessions to support you with your safeguarding journey. We've also got a lot of resources and tools that we're going to tell you about at the end. So our website is thecpsu.org.uk. So moving on, people get really confused about what the term safeguarding means. Maybe if I can ask Liza first, how would you define safeguarding?
I think it's a great question, Jude, because I think people use the word safeguarding and child protection interchangeably now, don't they, Jude? And I think people think it means the same thing. So for me, safeguarding is the preventative side of the work that we do to make sure that children and young people are safe in activities that they're doing, that their welfare is paramount and we're looking after their well-being. And then that child protection is the safety net when things go wrong. And we've got to seek partners from statutory agencies to be able to help and support to keep children safe in that particular instant that they're in and prevent any further harm from happening. And I think Joe's probably got like a really good analogy to describe that.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, I always think of the car and think it's because most people drive them. It's an easy way to kind of break barriers down. So we're saying that we want safeguarding to be accessible, but it should be so anyone can understand it. So if we're thinking about safeguarding, they're the things we put in place before anything happens. So how do we protect our cars? So number one, we have an MOT. We all have to do that every year. We should all have services as well, to make sure that car is fit for purpose, especially if we're on the road a lot, to prevent anything going nasty when we're driving down the motorway and we're not pulling up on the hard shoulder. But so that's the safeguarding. We're looking at child protection. That's if there's an incident that happens. So maybe your brakes lock, there might be a little bit of a crash. That's your seatbelt comes into place. It's your airbag that comes out to protect you. As Liza said, they're the things that kick in when an incident occurs to keep people or keep children safe is what we're looking at today. So yeah, I think that's a nice way to look at it. So again, it's easy to confuse. Everyone thinks maybe child protection is safeguarding. Well, they are two different things, and it's important that we know that. And the stronger our safeguards are to start off with, the less likely that we're going to go into those child protection. But we just need to be prepared should we need to do that too.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking, like, sometimes we hear people say, Jude, oh, I've done a DBS check, and people then think that is safeguarding and full stop, that's the end of it. And it's not just one tool that we've got as part of our safer recruitment processes. That's one part of safeguarding. So DBS checks are really important mechanism to help us to make suitability decisions around somebody working or volunteering with children and young people. But it's not the only thing. It's one thing amongst a whole tool bag that we've got at our disposal to keep young people safe. And in terms of safer recruitment processes, we can look at multiple things around that prevention side of safeguarding. So it could be that we've got references, we're doing interviews, we're doing application forms. So again, there's multiple things that we can do in the safer recruitment processes, and DBS is just one of those to help us make those wise choices about the people that are going to be working or supporting children and young people.
I think that's such an important point about DBS, because a lot of people do seem to think that safeguarding and DBS are the same things.
Yeah.
And from what you're both saying, I would summarise it as safeguarding is prevention, and child protection is reaction and response, and both are really important. But they are part of the. So moving on. We're thinking about why safeguarding is important. I know we get this question quite a lot, people saying, well, why do I need to do this? Why is this important? Well, the very fact that you're here, I think, tells us that you think it's important. So that's great. So I think I'll ask Joe first. What are the benefits of having good safeguards in place in clubs and activities?
Yeah, well, as you say, first and foremost, it's to keep children safe, isn't it? And by having a safe place for children to come and participate in an activity, instantly we're creating a space that can be enjoyed, so they can have fun in it. They're also likely, if children are feeling safe and happy and enjoying it, likely to come back, and that's the lifeblood, isn't it, of clubs and activities, is that retention and that membership. Now we need to make sure that we're keeping children, once they come through the door, giving them a reason to come back. Now it's all about creating that safe space, and if we don't do that, they're just not going to come back. And then we're thinking why, when there can be some really simple solutions to why having safeguarding is important. I think that's kind of the main reason for me. The children need to feel safe to be able to enjoy, but also parents and carers need to feel confident and safe that they're sending their children to a safe space, so they can relax when they're not by the side of the children and young people.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know, Liza, if there's anything you wanted to add there.
Yeah, for me, I think it's about the fact that, children are at home, they're at school, and the next biggest sector is sport and physical activity. And we know that our sports coaches, our volunteers that do these amazing work, the power of sport is fantastic. And it gives young people so many amazing opportunities. And I think those trusted adults that are helping and supporting our young people in our local communities are another set of eyes and ears that can advocate on behalf of children and young people. So it is that takes a village to raise a child. So for me, that's why it's important that we've got safeguarding in place, because that community is helping to raise that child. And if we've got good safeguards in place and our staff and our volunteers are able to recognise signs of abuse and harm, they can be those trusted adults that our young people would go to if there was any concerns that or worries that are happening at home, at school, in their wider community. And they're able to speak to an adult then that is able to then raise that with statutory agencies or with our colleagues in the helpline or with other people to be able to address any concerns that might be happening for young people. So I think for me, it's about that wider society responsibility. Like, safeguarding's everybody's responsibility, isn't it? So I think for me, it is about making sure that, the staff and volunteers know what to look for so that they can advocate on behalf of children and young people. So it's not just what happens in their sport and physical activity, it's about a young person's whole life. So for me, I think that's really important, why we need to get it right.
That's really interesting, because I know we've done some research with governing bodies of sport about the kind of concerns that arise.
Absolutely.
And where the concerns arise from. And we found that over half of the concerns that come up for them actually arise outside of the sports context. But the clubs have picked them up, and the activities have picked them up because that club and activity is a safe place for young people, and a place that they feel they can tell the staff and the volunteers there about something that's going on for them. So I think sport and physical activities can be a really safe place for young people if safeguards are in place appropriately.
Absolutely. And I think sport has unfortunately hit the headlines a lot over recent years, and for bad reasons at times. And I think we forget about the important part that sport plays in helping and supporting young people to stay safe. And even if abuse or trauma has happened in a child's life, sport plays an important role in supporting with repair. So if we're thinking about things like adverse childhood experiences, sport is really important in helping young people to address and deal with, say, toxic stress and be able to regulate. So for me, it's a really important part that we've got to play, and for us to be mindful of not re-traumatizing young people and being aware of ourselves, being reflective practitioners, whether we're being a sports coach, an instructor, whatever it might look like in that volunteer role, for us to be aware of ourselves and think about us being positive role models. So I think that whole having people understanding like best practice for their role that they're undertaking helps and supports young people to see about how adults should appropriately be acting. So I think we just play an enormous role in young people's lives in general.
Absolutely. So what are the risks then? What are the risks if we don't have safeguards in place? I'll turn to Joe again.
Yeah, so I'd start it with is the risks are massive, and this isn't like a scare exercise, because I think the really important thing to know within safeguarding is that everyone has a role within it, but it's where your role fits with it. So it's not that necessarily that you're going to have to do a massive investigation where you're working with police. It's just where you fit in that jigsaw puzzle, and so it can safeguard everyone within the organisation. I think a key one at the moment, it seems to hit the headlines a lot, certainly in the kind of social care settings, is the lower level concerns. So when we're talking about lower level concerns, we're looking at things that can be described as a nagging doubt. It can be behaviour that might not be in accordance with a code of conduct. So example could be a common one would be a coach shouting at a child in a way that's not fitting and is upsetting to that child. Now, over a pattern behaviour, if that continues to happen, it can be further detrimental to that child's emotional well-being. Now, it's really important that it needs recording. Now, that's quite a low-level example that maybe you wouldn't see escalate further, but we know often when there is a serious case that lower-level concerns have been present and there's been a failure to record them, and within the failure to record them, a failure to report further on. So if we were noticing a pattern behaviour of low-level concerns, we need to think maybe we need to do something with that, because there might be a concern there. So a probably more scary scenario might be a coach taking a child home. For the first time, the parents weren't able to pick them up. It was kind of last case scenario, but they didn't tell anyone about that. They just took the child home. But then it's becoming every week. 2 years down the line, there could be a concern of grooming. They were the first places it happened. Now, I'm not saying that happens on every single occasion, but it's a way that it's happened in the past. So we need to manage those low level concerns, make sure we've got robust policies in place, and we're really open about it, and it sets that culture. So when we talk about a safeguarding culture, lower level concerns is one of the first places we would start, because as soon as we start accepting poor behaviour or conduct, we're allowing that to happen, and we set a precedent that we don't take safeguarding seriously.
So it's about reporting everything, every little, every small, as you said, nagging doubt.
Absolutely. And we need to be realistic. So say if it was an example of someone shouting at a child as a one-off incident, that might not be enough to share. But if it's happened 2-3 times, they need recording. And then we've got a little chronology of what's happened. And that's helpful for, say, if a safeguarding officer then decided we need to speak to the LADO, which is the local authority for the designated officer. That's a professional in the local authority. If we're concerned about someone working with kids in regulated activity, we'd give them a ring, let them know. That pattern, that chronology is really useful for them to say, actually, we might be looking into this a little bit further. Or they might even say, thank you for letting me know. Doesn't quite meet our thresholds for intervention now, but we'll keep it on record. That is key if anything else happens. And it might not just be within your setting. It could be within other settings, and that could be a crucial piece in the puzzle.
And I think that's the thing about the risks of not having adequate safeguards in place. The risks are both to the child, that's absolutely that's got to be at the heart of everything, but also to the organisation in terms of your own reputational risk. And then there could be funding and insurance implications as well.
No, definitely. I think when you talk about reputation there, Jude, it can take years and years and years to gain a really good reputation that's trusted in the community, but it can take 2 seconds to obliterate it, and trying to regain your reputation once it's been destroyed can be nigh impossible. So it's really important, and it's not just because it's a reputational thing why we'd say it, even though it can damage, especially with the insurance. It's because it's the right thing to do, bottom line.
Tell you what, I'm going to move us on to the next question, because I think we're starting to think about what we might need to have in place to have a safeguarding, as Joe talked about, a safeguarding culture, a safe place for children and young people. So I'll go back to Liza. So if you were joining a new club or an activity, what would you be looking for to show that it's a safe place for children and young people?
I think first and foremost for me, it's about the environment, isn't it? The culture. How does it feel? Does it feel like a warm, safe, caring place? So I think it's essential that people have policies and procedures, but I think it's about how it feels as well. Is that culture the right culture? Does it feel like they've got the best interest of children and young people at the heart of what they're doing? Because if we get it right for young people, then we're going to get it right for everybody else as well. So that ripple effect, really, if we're being child-centred, it will mean then the staff are protected, the volunteers are protected, parents feel assured that their young people, their precious little baby that they're handing over on a Wednesday night, are looked after. So for me, that's a really important part. And I think, yes, if we think, me and Joe have used the word culture a lot, and if we're thinking about that iceberg analogy, like, having minimum operating standards, so your policies, your procedures, your guidelines in place that help and support our staff and volunteers to know what we should be doing, to have those best practices. And then the bit underneath is that culture, underneath the sea level. That then helps people that sets the tone about what should be in place. And we need to be making sure that we've got the right people who are suitable to be involved in it, that they're leading it, that they're adhering to what the policies and procedures saying. But ultimately, it's about making sure that the welfare of children and young people is paramount to the heart of everything that people are doing within that organisation. So for me, I think that all comes from whoever's leading that organisation, that club, that activity. They're the people that are going to be driving whether this feels like a happy, safe, welcoming, enjoyable opportunity where young people have got a voice in their sport and physical activity.
And Joe, any other thoughts that you've got around, so if you're walking into a new club or an activity, what you might be looking for?
Yeah, the visibility is massive, isn't it? So it's clear who we report concerns to. And we really normalize that. So they're not someone who's stuck in the corner of a room. It's uncomfortable conversation. It's allowing people to know roles, and that we celebrate safeguarding like it's not a dirty word. Safeguarding isn't just there for when things go wrong. It's to prevent it. It's to prevent it. Also, that people feel empowered to talk and talk openly, and that we're not trying to oppress. Now, if there are concerns that are raised, it's not, as I just said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. What is a good thing for parents and children to see is that if something has gone wrong, that you've done something about it. That's living that's living your documents, your policies and procedures. It's important they're implemented. If we don't back that up with our actions, they're not worth the paper that they're written on. Again, with visibility, can we share those policies and procedures with parents and carers? Have we got child-friendly kind of documents so they can feel attached to the safeguards too as well? So they're things that I think are really important. But the visibility, the normalization of safeguarding, that it's a good thing, and that we have a transparent culture.
I think it's interesting you talked about child-friendly information, and one of the things that I know I quite often look for if I would go into a club was evidence that children are actually being involved and they're actually participating and being consulted with, because we know that if we're listening to children about the small things, so that might be, okay, what we're going to do to warm up, or who's going to design the poster, or what kit we're going to wear, that's going to have again, I'm going to use the word culture, but it's going to impact the culture of listening to them about the big things as well. And they're going to think, actually, this is a space where I feel I can talk about things that are worrying me. And I've seen some great examples of that, like posters designed by young people. Who is their safeguarding lead?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it links in with organisations like UK Coaching and Sport England are doing around their Play Their Way campaign. So if we've got coaches and instructors that are having young people actively involved in their sessions about planning it, designing it, delivering it, then that creates a safer atmosphere for young people. So then they know that they can go to those trusted adults about serious things that might be impacting on them. So I think the voice of children and young people should be a golden thread throughout everything that we're doing in terms of safeguarding, to make sure that young people know that they're respected, they feel valued, and they feel heard. And people respond positively when young people have got something to tell us and want to contribute to it. So yeah, I think that's a really important part of a culture within an environment that we're working in, and that young people are part of that planning process as well, and they're kept informed of any decision. So we've got lots of information, haven't we, Jude, on our website around the voice of children and young people. We've got some sports that have contributed to it and some active partnerships as well. And I think if anybody on the call are involved with organisations like Street Games, they do sessions around listening to the voices of children and young people. So I think take up those opportunities, because that's not, I think people sometimes think, oh, what's that got to do with sport and physical activity? But I think what it does, it's that holistically looking at that child. So yeah, it's going to help keep them safe, because they're going to feel empowered to be able to speak up when something's gone wrong. But it also helps make young people better sports people, better human beings ultimately, because they'll end up with, confidence, self-esteem, leadership, good communication, good team building skills. So it just helps make those rounded individuals that we know that sport does for young people. But by doing that voice work, it just adds to that and creates better human beings, so far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And I know Joe was mentioning safeguarding policies and procedures, and often that's a criteria for funding, that you need to have safeguarding policies and procedures. A lot of people get quite confused about the terminology of policies and procedures. So I tend to think of it as a policy being a statement saying we're committed to safeguarding, and that could be signed off by perhaps a management committee in your club or your activity, or a senior, anybody who's managing that.
And I think we've got loads of stuff on our website, haven't we, Jude, as well, to help organisations
We've got a
So I think,
template actually, which might be quite useful. Yeah.
And I think sometimes people wouldn't know where to start. And I think a great place to start is to look at the templates that are on our website that would enable people just to have a starting point and maybe look at what other organisations are doing. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's stuff out there for people to be able to professionally adopt.
Totally agree. Yes. And often when we think about procedures, there could be procedures for all kinds of things. Because safeguarding, as Joe talked about earlier, it covers a range of different areas. So, Joe, what kind of procedures do you think we should be having on safeguarding? What should be included?
There's loads. I think a flow chart for me is something that works really nicely. You can get bogged down in the policies and procedures. So as you've both just mentioned, we have a section on our website which is broken down into different. So it could be an events tool document, it could be a lower level concerns policy. So they'll have the information of what you should have in the policy, and then the procedure side of it is what do we need to do. For me, if something like a flow chart, so anyone can look at it and follow, is really, really important. And it just breaks those barriers down again, making them super simple to understand in a step-by-step guide. Also, if you do need help with that section, then if you contact someone else, you can talk to them where you are in that process, which is really, really useful in linking in with other safeguarding partners.
Lisa, any other things that you could think of that would be useful to include in those procedures, or the guidance as well? There might be separate guidance documents.
Yeah, I think codes of conduct are really important as well, Jude. So that not only just for, quite often we think it's about for coaches or instructors. For me, it's about young people as well and how they interact with each other, how we're going to behave in our club. It could be about parents as well, if you've got parents spectating or being supporters of their children and young people. So I think they're a really important document that helps everybody in that organisation, in that club, in that activity to get along with each other, to help us to know what's expected behaviour from everybody. And then if it does go wrong and maybe some people overstep those boundaries, come out of those expected behaviours, we're able to kind of speak to people and say, this is how we work together in this club environment. And coming back to the voice of children and young people, it's really important to get young people to be part of that design of those codes of conduct for children. So written by young people for young people. And then that gets that better engagement and that better buy-in from young people because they've made their own rules up as well. So it gives them that control over their day-to-day activity that's provided to them. So for me, I think that they're just a really important document for people to be able to have. And again, we've got some sample templates on our website, and I think don't just lift them off the website, have a look at them, maybe work with your staff team, work with your volunteers, work with your children, your parents, to make sure that they're suitable for your environment that you're in, because each sport and physical activity environment is different. So there might be some nuances in particular for that particular organisation. So I'd look at them as examples and then think about what makes sense within your particular activity.
I think one that's like important that we I suppose when you break it down would be the consent form. Do you know when we're talking about? I suppose that covers a host of things of safeguarding. So with GDPR that we've got permission, but also that we can hold details to protect children, which are the basics of like contact details, because of the kind of loco parentis operators that we would do when children are in our care. But knowing information about allergies, who to contact should there be an emergency, are really important things, which can be easy to overlook maybe if it's an activity that we might feel that we don't need that, but it should be done for everything. And then having that bank of like incident forms, just a hand can also encourage staff, yourselves to feel confident in reporting.
I think the reporting is so important, having clear reporting processes and the forms to do that, or a clear process as to how you report that. And you mentioned, Joe, before about that you need to record. You need to. We could often say on our training, record, because that at every stage, if you've got any concerns, actually write it down, sign and date it is what I always think is important.
And I think, as Joe said before, having that flow chart, because in that situation where you go, oh my gosh, somebody's telling me something that's worrying, and your mind goes blank. So those documents help and support people to be able to not panic in that crisis, because people will, if it's not something that you do all the time, if you're a teacher, you'll probably be doing those things all the time, but maybe it's something that you've not come across. So those documents help you to ask the right questions, make sure you got the right information, helps you to follow, if this happens, this happens, this happens, this is what I do next. So I think it just takes the stress out of those situations. So it's not, you're almost front loading the information to help and support you as an individual if something does happen. If a child protection, as we said about earlier, happens, you've got that safety blanket of going, right, well, if I do A, B, and C, then I'm getting it right. And that just helps take all of the stress out, not all the stress, but takes a lot of the stress out of that situation.
Actually, the stress is a really interesting one as well, because we know that when you are managing any concerns, any safeguarding concerns, it's really stressful. So also think about where you get support from, where you yourselves get support from. I think that's a really important area too.
Jude, we talk about like organisations that we work with. So I don't know, I think we've got a variety of organisations on the course. So NGBs are a good place for people to get support from. A lot of them have got safeguarding officers, active partnerships. If people are getting funding through active partnerships, they've got lead officers and deputy lead officers and sport welfare officers that are able to help and support. And if people are, again, getting supported by organisations like Street Games, they've got mechanisms there. They've got regional welfare officers and a lead safeguarding officer. So I think there's quite a lot of places that people can get support. And obviously, if it's if you're really worried about a child or young person, there's the helpline as well, isn't it? The NSPCC helpline, which are there to support people to get that advice, and you're not having to think about, what do we do in this situation? You can get professional advice from somebody that's going to give you the right information.
We've talked about a lot of things there, and I think some of the key points that we've talked about, having somebody who leads on safeguarding within your club or activity, that's really important, that everyone knows that they're there. Having some sound safeguarding policy and procedures, and we've talked about some of the resources on our website that you can draw on there. And then also having a culture where you're involving children all the way through that as well. So kind of you're keeping children involved, you're consulting with children at every stage. But I just wanted to bring it to life a little bit. So you've both got lots of experience in working across sport and physical activity. And I'll start with Liza this time. Can you give me an example of what good safeguarding looks like in practice?
It's a really good one, that, Jude. And I think for me, I think it's about you just looking at, some of the basic stuff really I think it just comes down to four R's really. So recognising when there's abuse or harm that could be happening to a child or young person. So that would be about, going and getting some safeguarding education. So things like this, maybe doing an online course, maybe looking at something like SPC, Safeguarding Protecting Children, from UK Coaching, or Time to Listen, or the Welfare Officer Training course from UK Coaching again. It's about responding appropriately. So responding when there is a concern. So not panicking, not making promises to young people to keep things a secret, not, being mindful of who you're sharing that information with, sharing it confidentially with the right people, reporting those concerns. So reporting it to, if you've got a structure within your organisation, reporting it to the right person who might then refer that on, if it's necessary, to other organisations outside, like statutory agencies. And the other R is record, that you've already mentioned there, Jude. And Joe talked before about that pattern of behaviour. So we're able to record if there's a pattern of abuse that might be a young person might be experiencing, or a pattern of behaviour that makes us worried about somebody's suitability to work with children and young people. So I think for me, just those 4 R's really, I think is really important about that practice of responding and recognising, responding, report, and recording.
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned the post one before, so I use a different one, but the post one I do think is brilliant because it's a visual document where you've got a child or young person to design and then to put up, it just shows them that what they've done matters, and it'll also break, hopefully, the barrier down for other children and young people, that they can access something that one of their peers has done, because sometimes it might feel just a bit more friendly if it's been done by one of their peers. But I think, so when we're looking at, again, voice of the child as part of that's been picked up in the Ware review, is something that we need to focus on. But it's, if we're asking to, say, if we're doing a survey at the end of an activity and getting children's voice that way, that's a good thing to do. But we don't always work with children who are able to communicate the same as each other. So if we've got children who are maybe non-verbal, what are we doing for those children to make sure that we're capturing their voices? Now, that might be that we're linking in with their parents or carers to ask maybe how have they been after the activity, what impact has it had on them, positives, but also things that might have been challenging for them. And then once we've got that feedback, we communicate what we've done with it. So it's basically a you said, we did. Now, some organisations have said, these are the things that you've said to us, and these are the things that we've responded to and put in practice. And we can't always act on the suggestions that are made, obviously not if they're safeguarding, but if not, we're having an open communication on why that might not have happened on this occasion. So I think that's a strong one. It's a really easy win for me to do, of capturing children and youth voice. And it's not always everyone's favourite activity to do it at the end of a session. So try and break it in with something else. Whatever your activity is, you can maybe build it in and use that as part of it, and do it in a creative way, so it's not like a tick box for you.
Steve, you work with street games, don't you? And I know they've got some quite good examples as to how they put safeguarding into practice.
Yeah, so Joe mentioned before about consent forms and some of the work that street games do. So they work with young people who it may be in inner city areas, maybe in deprived communities that are engaging in antisocial behaviour, for example. So what they're trying to do is to try and meet young people where they're at, so then engaging with young people in their local areas, their local parks, their local sports cages. And sometimes that's really difficult to get young people then to go away with a consent form and go and get parents to fill it in, because maybe there's some disengagement with parents, maybe young people don't want to go back home. So one of the things that they encourage those doorstep opportunities for young people is to just even get some basic information from young people. So get your mobile phone out, what's your mum or dad or carers' phone numbers, have you got any allergies, have you got any injuries that we need to be aware of? So maybe even just young people, depending on their age, will probably know quite a lot of stuff anyway that we might get parents to do, and then give young people the form, go away and then next week bring that back with you. So it's, they don't want to turn young people away if they're engaging in positive activities, because the risks alternatively could be something more serious. So they want to get young people engaged. So by trying to break down some of those barriers in the first place that, maybe in traditional clubs that we might be saying, oh, you can't start until we've got the consent forms, they're trying to maybe problem solve around some of those initial barriers to getting young people involved. And then once young people are hooked in it, then we need to kind of get that consent form filled in, so we've got those basic things in place. Just thinking as well, Jude, about competitions or maybe fun days that people might have. So people putting in things like welfare plans, so having a plan about how we're going to keep young people safe in sport and competitions, or those fun days that we might be doing on our local greens within our communities. So I think we've got an events online training course, and I think that would be really relevant for some of the people on the call. So sometimes we think about it as being a big sports competition. It doesn't have to be that. It could be those informal holiday activities that people are going to be running over the summer holidays. And I think something like going on those courses might really help people to think about, well, what do I need to have in place? I need to have a welfare plan. I need to make sure that people are safely recruited. I need to have codes of conduct. I need to do some education with the staff and volunteers about basics around what to look for, what to do if we've got a concern or a worry about a child, thinking about things like refreshments, making sure that it's clearly labelled around allergies and stuff like that. So there's lots of things to think about when we're putting on any events. And I think for me, thinking about fun days, which I know a lot of active partnership organisations are on the call today, they might be putting on some of those summer activities, which I think would be really important for them to think about those wider safeguards and those preventative front loading to prevent bigger issues from happening. So prevention's better than cure, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I think that is the key message here, is just making sure we anticipate what could go wrong. And I think, and Joe mentioned before, around some young people will have different needs, some young people will be non-verbal, so it's looking at your own audience. And I think that's often central to me. It's thinking about, okay, who are we working with, what are their specific needs, where are the specific risks, and how can we address those. I think we've been going for a while, so I'm gonna turn to Rachel, who I think probably has a couple of questions that have been coming through. And if you do have questions, you can still put them into the chat. If we don't get through them all, we will kind of do a question and answer document afterwards. So Rachel, what questions are coming through?
Yes, we've got a couple of questions, and I think they're both really useful to kind of open up discussions as well. So the first one goes back to, I think, policies and procedures. It's a specific question around a judo club that operates out of a social club. And I imagine that's quite a common kind of situation for a lot of activity groups and clubs. So the social club is open to its members at the same time that the judo sessions take place. And the question is, what specific policies should the judo club be putting in place to safeguard their younger members?
I do think it happens quite a bit, though. We see that with like rugby, they tend to have, like, I'm assuming in the social club has got maybe a bar as part of it as well. So we see that with like the likes of bowls. They have, refreshments, I'll say, facilities and stuff. Even some sports centres have bars as well. So I know where I used to live, the local sports centre had a bar as well attached to it. So I think it's about looking at it as you are a third party using that organisation's space. So I think it's about what's that third party venue got in place as well. So they got their own safeguarding policies and procedures as well in place. What is the process about, people having alcohol in there? Can you have another way of accessing that facility rather than having to go through the whole social? Because I think you can't necessarily dictate to the third party, the venue, about what they can and can't do. You're hiring that particular facility. So you're having to work as a dual purpose within that. So I think it is about, having conversations, what's in place, thinking about things like changing room facilities. So is, the toilets, who else is going to be in there? Just keeping an eye on. So if kids are going out to the toilets and stuff, are you clocking who's gone to the toilet, how long they've been? We've got somebody else to help and support young people, if they've been gone for a long time. Because if you're the only instructor in that particular environment, who else is there? You've got nobody else to be able to support you. So thinking about your ratios as well. So who else can support if something goes wrong in that environment? I think it's probably something to maybe talk over with British Judo as well. They're an organisation that's got good safeguarding in place. So they've got quite an extensive safeguarding policy. So their safe landing is really, really detailed. So I'd be looking at what does their policy and procedure say? And it's maybe worth giving Andy, who's their safeguarding officer, a call here to talk about some of those key factors as well that might be impacting on you. So I think first and foremost, it's about having a conversation with the third party, with the venue, to see if there's any gaps. So risk assessing where the flashpoints could be. And if there's any concerns that have previously been raised with you as the instructor, what things can you put in place to mitigate against those risks that have been identified or themes that have come up? And maybe it's not the right environment. So maybe you might need to change your environment if your risk assessment says it's not suitable. But I think I'd start with looking at what your policies and procedures say and what you can do with the venue to see if there's any changes that you can make. Joe, I'm sure you've got some bright ideas as well that I've probably missed out on.
I just dead quick, so I'm mindful of the time of it, but it's the vast majority of sports that are played outside will come in, will have similar issues. So anyone who's playing on a park, you can't manage the whole park at one time. So it's about having that localized risk assessment and the contextual safeguarding side of it. So what identifying the local risk to that activity and putting a robust policy in place. And if you remember, with the NGB of judo, asking them to have a look at it, make sure they think it's fit for purpose. And as Liza said, Andy will definitely be happy to help out with anything like that.
So any more
yes,
questions?
There are 2 more questions. So this is a really interesting question that I will be honest, I have never come across before. So somebody's asking, again, I imagine it goes back to kind of putting in place our kind of policies, procedures. They've asked, is there a similar scheme to the Ask for Angela scheme that children or kind of young people will use? And just for anybody that's on the call tonight that might not have heard of that phrase before, it's basically like a code phrase that someone can say to a staff member to let them know without saying in black and white that they require help around maybe their safety, and then a trained member of staff will then kind of look to support that person who asked for Angela. I know it's quite common in like clubs and bars and things. And I suppose maybe that question goes back to involving children and young people in those processes so they are aware of where to go. And in your organisation, that might be a replicated Ask for Angela scheme. And I think that's potentially a really good idea. I'm not sure if anyone has any further input on that one.
I mean, I agree. It's a great idea. I'm not aware of anything like that. I don't know if you are, Liza or Joe.
No, not as like a national thing, but I think to have it localized is incredible, isn't it? And it's having that difficult conversation with children. It's facilitating that space and how to look out for them. We know the vast majority of the times that a child isn't going to come up and disclose straight away, so it's looking at their behaviour. But what you're suggesting is that you're giving them another route to come in. Maybe if they say that to you, you can then help them along with that. So whoever's give that suggestion, it's amazing. Run with it for your organisation. Once you've done that, share it with others, because that's how best practice happens. And we share it with each other. So that's a great shout.
And just thinking about the work that our colleagues do in Childline. So we've got Buddy the Speech Bubble, haven't we? So our Childline NSPCC colleagues go in and do the work in schools around Buddy the Speech Bubble, around finding a trusted adult. But I think, signposting young people to Childline as well. So the Childline website's got loads of information actually on the website, but young people can talk directly to a counsellor either through chat function or an actual call with a counsellor as well. So I think there's more avenues that young people have got to raise their concerns, and for us to make it as easy as possible for young people to tell us about any worries or concerns, the better it is. So I think Ask Angela is a fantastic idea in that localised area.
Yeah, I think that person's just said again that they've rolled out in their general safeguarding policy at their venue. So again, that's a brilliant example of good practice. And then just a last question. So this person is running sessions for a mixture of kind of ages and abilities. So they're looking at grouping different ages. Would this demonstrate kind of good safeguarding practice to split the sessions by age range? So things like 4 to 10, 10 to 16, 20 to 25 and 30 plus. Obviously, we're kind of focusing on under 18s, but
I think a lot of sport is divided from age groups, and it depends on the sport. So you've got sports like table tennis, which is multi-generational, and it doesn't matter, you can have like children's competition, so under 18s competition, but then they'll have open categories where, a 15-year-old could be playing against somebody who's 70, which I think brings benefits and challenges as well. So I think it depends on the sport and physical activity. So Joe, you're talking about rugby before, you wouldn't want to put a 9-year-old with a 16-year-old from a health and safety perspective, would you?
No, the weight and the height, it depends, especially with the physical sports. When you get that physical advantage, even if you've got a 10-year-old who's 6 foot, the strength of a 15, 16-year-old is likely to be very, very, very different. So it's sticking within guidelines, especially with sports, with what the national governing body are recommending, and it's typically not beyond 2 years either side.
So we've talked quite a lot about some of the templates and tools that we've got on our website, in particular the putting safeguards in place for children in sport. That's recently been updated, reworded and broken down. So that's a good place to start. But also, if you're looking at our safeguarding tools, we have a self-assessment tool. So an essential self-assessment tool that is a good place as well to think about, okay, what do I need? And just work through the questions there to find out more information. There is information around disclosure and borrowing service, because we haven't had any questions about that, but we know we get a lot of questions, and Liza talked about it before. But then you also might be interested in some further learning that we've got available. So there are a number of webinars and podcasts we've got on the website, and they're all free to access on a variety of different topics. And also we run training with the NSPCC, so there's also training courses that you can purchase from those sites. So I'll send out those links as well, so that you've got all of that information too. I will just sum up, and I'm just going to ask Liza and Joe for one final thing, one message that you'd like to get to end with. So Joe, what was your final message?
So just having an awareness. I hope that this is giving you an awareness of some support that's out there for you, and that whilst it can seem like a massive journey, but when you do it step by step, it's actually really achievable. Also, that the support out there, people will want to help. If you think that your knowledge isn't where it needs to be, people aren't going to judge you. So if you contact someone like the NSPCC helpline because you feel that something isn't right, the only thing that they'll be doing is thanking you and exploring the concerns with you. So my message is that you're not on your own. There's plenty of support out there, and people want to help. You've displayed commitment to that today, so thank you for everyone for turning up in the evening.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. And Liza, one final message from you.
I think sometimes, people try and get bogged down with not knowing how to write a good policy or procedures and stuff like that. And as Joe said, there's loads of information out there. So definitely check out our website. That can help and support people to do that. But I think ultimately, the big thing for me is having spent many, many years working with children and young people, they know the people that care about them. So as long as you've got the right people in the right jobs and roles and responsibilities, whether it be paid or volunteers, that's the main thing, is getting the right people to take care of those young people, to be their role models, their coaches, their instructors. So I think for me, it's just about genuine people that care about what's in the best interests of children and young people, and getting that right value base, so getting the right people in with the right attitude and the right values towards young people's future.